Well, my beginning, as I just told you, was 1916.
Yes.
When I was a pupil in the Sunday school. And I've been there ever since.
And you were a child in the Sunday school?
I was a child at
In the Sunday
1916. I was 5.
And then you worked through, you were a teacher?
Yes, yes. I was a teacher for 50 years. Leaving out a couple of years when Margaret was born. That was all.
And who was the superintendent of the Sunday school?
Miss Randall.
Miss Randall.
Miss Randall, yes.
Yeah.
She was superintendent for many, many years, and she was very strict too. I mean, if we wanted to be teaching on Sunday, we'd got to be at prep class on Tuesday.
Yes.
If not, you were not allowed to teach. And she, well, she took us at 14. I went at 14 to be trained. And when you were trained at 14, you then went into the primary, because they considered that that age they needed the older teachers to do the beginners, you see. So we were not allowed to teach with the beginners until we were much older.
Yes. And what was the size of the Sunday school then?
Very big.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was very big at that time. Well, 200 or 300 pupils, I would say, and
200 or 300?
yeah, yes, and a lot of staff, 30, 40 staff. Yeah, because it was. We were in the lecture hall at that time. What is now the you know, don't you? The
coffee man.
That's right.
Yes.
In the lecture hall and in the old schoolroom, and all those vestries behind there, which are not there now. That's where we had our classes. Sunday mornings, no, Sunday afternoons.
Sunday afternoons,
yes. Yeah.
So that meant a service in the morning,
And the one in the
teaching
evening.
in the afternoon,
That's right.
and then evening.
Yes.
This was the routine for many, many
Yes.
people in those days.
And then singing around the piano when you got home.
Yeah. Yes. Making your own songs of praise.
Yes. Very nice too.
And from the Sunday school, did the Girls' Brigade develop, or was that running parallel?
No, the Girls' Brigade, I think it was much later. 1936.
Oh.
Yeah, 1936 when it was formed, the 8th Norwich Company. And it was formed, it was the first time we'd had one there, and my sister Olive was the captain and I was the lieutenant, and John Box was the other lieutenant. And we had cadets, about 7 to 10 years old, and the brigadiers from 11 upwards, about 30 girls in the company.
And presumably this was part of a Norwich battalion.
Oh yes,
Many,
yes it was.
many companies.
Mm. Well, we were number 8. I think they went up to 12 after that, because there were some more formed after ours, but we were 8. And we met on Friday evenings, and there were various activities, physical exercise and drill and rhythmic exercises for the displays that you've got the photographs of, handwork and Bible teaching, and rallies, of course.
What do you remember of the of Timmy's Club?
Quite a lot. Well, you see, I think when I first joined, they were what they call the left and the right wingers. You know what that meant, don't you? There was the lot from the Sunday school, and then there was all these outside boys, the leather jacket boys, that came in. That was they tried to mix it, but it didn't mix. Not really, but that's what Tim wanted, and which was, of course, the right way, but it didn't work. The outside ones, they didn't want to do anything except listen to music, play darts perhaps, but they didn't want any of the activities that the others had, which was, you find there quite a lot of things they did, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it didn't really work. I think it was the right wingers who didn't want to mix with the left wingers. That was the trouble.
Yes. They probably didn't find much common ground.
No, they didn't. No. They didn't, because Margaret was one of them, and she didn't care about these boys from outside, I don't think.
Yes. Well, there were quite a few at that time. Martin I'm Martin.
You're Martin,
Yes,
of course, yes,
yeah.
yes.
I remember we had Colin Saunders come down with us, help us.
Yes. Colin came to help with Tim and me and you, I think, weren't you there
Yes,
then?
I think
But after Tim left, there was a bit of bother, wasn't there?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was.
That left Colin and me, I think, I'm right?
Yes,
Do you remember that?
yes.
And I think we carried on until such time as Colin changed his job. I think that's what took him away.
Mm.
And then, of course, we closed it down. But it was getting a little bit hairy, you know, there were 1 or 2 knives about and things like that.
Yes, yes.
But we managed.
Trouble with trustees.
Oh, yes, always trouble with the trustees. Well, they didn't do a lot of harm, and they were fun, really. I liked them. When it came to the end of the evening and we had an epilogue downstairs, do you remember that?
Yes, forcing them down.
They used to hide up, didn't they, on the
Yes.
way down the stairs?
Yes.
But, I mean, I still see some of them, you know, that lots of them married now with families, and they turned out to be quite nice boys.
Yes.
The girls I didn't care very much for because they used to pinch each other's clothes and things, you know, and that's really what I had to go to court about.
You had to go to court.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes, a girl, 2 girls stole another girl's coat, I think is what it was.
Mm.
And I had to go down to the Labour Club in Bethel Street because that's where they'd gone, and I got permission to look through the cloakroom and found it. So off I had to go to the police station, and I don't think I'll ever forget that night because poor little Margaret was wondering where I got to, you see, and I was on my little motorbike and living up at Earlham, and it was getting on for 11 o'clock when I got home. And then, of course, I had the mothers asking me if I'd go to court and support the girls who'd done the pinching.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was Lady Ralph's court. She was on the bench that day. Mr. Barnes I liked very much, George Barnes. And, of course, Mr. Perry. He didn't like the hymn I chose for my mother's funeral. That wouldn't do, he said, but we had it nevertheless. Mr. Loy I liked very much. He was such a kind man, wasn't he? And
Yes, yes.
never very well. We were very, very fond of him. Because all these men, you see, they came and went, didn't they? And you got used to them and liked them, and off they went.
Yes.
And there are very few that we didn't like, I think. Mr. Hopper, he was all right. Mrs. Hopper we liked very much. And, of course, Mr. Dowson, I think he was a great favourite with everybody. Mr. Ream, I see I was steward in Mr. Ream's time. And I used to get down there quite early for christenings and to find he'd done it all, you know. He'd got all the books out and everything in the pews. But he used to come to fellowship quite a lot and speak to us, you know, very nicely. The sort of thing we needed. And of course Peter Lemon, what did we say about him? First thing I remember about Peter was he got hold of me and dragged me out of the vestry. That was when I was a steward. And telling me all what his plans about putting another ceiling in, you know. That's about the first thing he ever said to me, I think. I like Peter very much, and I do miss him still. He didn't have very much time to talk to you when you wanted to speak. He was always sort of moving away, wasn't he? Yeah. But he did listen. He was very kind to me at lots of times. And going back to Mr. Dowson, I remember his kindness because he was never very well, was he?
No.
And when my father died, he'd said to me, whatever time it is, ring me. And I didn't ring him till 8 o'clock in the morning. And Mrs. Dowson said, I'm afraid he's ill in bed. So I said, well, don't mention it to him. But within about an hour he was round, took the phone out of my hand and did everything for me. He was great.
Ken Elworthy.
Yes, he was another very nice little man. He was very helpful to me when Kathleen was ill.
Yes.
He used to come round almost every day to see Kathleen. Even when she didn't know he was there, he still came.
Mm.
We never had him conducting Sunday morning services enough, I didn't think. He'd
Ken.
do the evening ones. I said something to him about it once, because he was very good, I thought. And he said, well, I don't make the plans.
How do you see the future, Connie?
I'm very hopeful. I always have been, because I feel that it's up to us, isn't it? As no good people keep complaining, which they have done for many, many years, you've got to do something, haven't you? And be willing to do something, be willing to take part and to do what you can to... I can't see the church closing or going down. Doesn't look very hopeful at times, does it? But I shouldn't like it if it did. Because I think some of the problems we've got so many old people, haven't we? Not enough young ones, not enough middle ones
No.
to take their places.
Talking about the future, going back to the beginning, presumably there was a huge membership when the two churches got together.
Oh yes, yes. And we had a good membership before that. Well, there was nothing else to do, you see. That was one of the things, I think. And when we were young people, if we weren't going to something at church, we weren't allowed to go out at all. And there was junior guild and senior guild and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you could get out, and that was the only way you could meet the gang of boys who also went to church. Like the anniversaries, you see. I mean, we had tremendous size anniversaries, huge platforms built up, and if you weren't there for the rehearsals, you weren't allowed to have a place on the platform.
No.
That's how things went then, you see. And we had these lovely little operettas and all sorts of things we did. Because there was no television, no radio.
No. Of course, the Park Lane Choir had quite a reputation, hadn't it?
Oh,
I remember
yes,
when I
yes.
came, they were talking about
Yeah.
the certificates and the prizes they'd
Yeah,
won.
it did. Well, there were competitions, you see, at
Yes.
St Andrew's Hall, and choirs just went and took part in them, and we did have a very good choir, and they broadcast several times, didn't they?
Yes, yeah.
Was Bill Martin associated with it for a long time?
50 years, wasn't he?
Yeah.
A bit more than that. Because they lived in Glebe Road, you see, at that time.
That's right, yes. When I came,
Yeah.
they were there.
Yeah, he was always Park Lane,
Mm.
and Rosie.
Who would come from Lady Lane then that we have known, or most of the people we talked to were original Park Lane people.
I can't remember. I can only remember an old lady called Miss Peel, who came from Lady Lane. Can't remember anybody else. Because she asked me if I would take on the IBRA. I was only about 16, and I've done that ever since. But that's the only one. I can't remember anybody else from Lady Lane. There must have been a lot. Well, there was a big congregation from there, wasn't it?
Yes. People like the Nichols and the Harboards and so on, they were all late.
Well, I'm
later.
not sure where they came from. If they did come from Lady Lane. Can't ask them now, can we?
No, no.
But they were all the, what shall we call them now? Because we were known as a snob church, as you may know. Because of them. I mean, we had a lot of moneyed people, which we needed, but they were perfectly all right. They were friendly and kind, and nothing snobbish about it that I ever remember.
Do you remember the building?
The building?
The building of
The old building?
No, of
Lady Lane, yes. Oh, yes, we used to go there, their Sunday school anniversaries. And that was always packed. Oh, yes, that was a typical old Methodist church with a gallery around, like ours was, you see. We had a gallery, didn't we? It was the same sort of building. Yes, I think I saw somewhere in this book where the two congregations together amounted to more than they were originally. I mean, more people came in
yes.
from the area, I should think. And we always had a good congregation. I can remember chairs having to be put down the aisles for all sorts of things,
Yes.
which doesn't happen now, does it?
No. Anniversaries, we always used to
Oh
bring in
yes,
chairs.
absolutely packed
Yeah.
out for anniversaries.
Yeah.
And the gallery as well, of course, is where all the boys sat in the gallery and just pulled faces at us and make us laugh. We had a lot of fun,
We should cover.
Did Tim say anything about Wynne in the canteen?
He tell
Yes,
us a bit about
about
the
the
canteen.
canteen.
He
Yeah.
briefly referred to,
Yeah.
but we'd like to know a bit more about
He
it.
didn't mention about Wynne. No.
No.
No,
No,
I'm
he
not
told us
sure if Wynne did, but Mrs. Mrs. Wilkinson, she organised that.
Yes.
Mm. That's right, yes, Mrs. Wilkinson organised that. And there's quite a bit about that in here too. That was kept on right throughout the war.
Mm.
Morning, noon and night, all of
Yes.
every day.
Yes.
Very useful thing.
Yes, Tim.
Eggs on toast, that was the chief
Eggs on toast.
thing
And
we
beans
did.
on toast.
And beans on toast, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were 1 or 2 marriages came out of that too.
Is that right?
Mm.
Mm.
Because at the back of that church hall, there were, because the pulpit was raised up, and then each side there were big panels like that, big wood panels that went right across each side of the pulpit, and behind those panels was a little space, like a little room,
Mm.
and the organ was pumped from behind there, and that's where we had the canteen, in one of those little rooms there,
Mm.
and that was very successful.
And who were the customers?
The servicemen and women in the area.
No Americans.
I don't think so. I don't remember any Americans. No, no. Some of them came from Scotland. I do remember that.
Really?
Mm. Because Connie Thompson, who helped us at the time, she married one of them, and she's still living up there. Well, that was never closed. That was kept open Christmas Day and Easter, and right throughout the time.
And there were occasions, presumably during the war, when everybody had to suddenly clear the decks. And
Oh yes, yes. Lots of times. That's what happened on the first service on that September the 3rd. You see, the sirens went as soon as we got out of church.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a real alarm. I think it was just a tryout, but we hadn't heard them before, and of course we were very much alarmed and went home as quickly as we could. And then they sounded again on the Thursday night when they actually had that service, the opening
Yes.
service. That was when DeLacy Evans conducted it.
was the service actually interrupted, or was it after?
No, I think it was after. No, I think if it had been interrupted, the church would have been emptied. I'm sure it would.
We talked a lot about the old times and so on. Have we talked about the women's
No,
meeting,
no.
women's evening fellowship?
No, we haven't.
No, you haven't, do you?
No.
I've got a little bit about that, because I'll have to... That goes back a long while, you
Presumably you've
see.
been associated with it.
Ever since the beginning. That was formed in 1951, and we used to call it Mrs. Perry's class because she was our leader
Yes.
then. And we were all women with little children or young families, and we met in the choir vestry. But we didn't have a register until about 1966, and then we had 41 members.
Mm.
But during all that time, our leader was usually the minister's wife.
Yes.
Not always, but Mrs. Loy, for
I was
instance.
going to say, I remember it being called Mrs. Loy's class.
Yeah, Mrs. Loy and Mrs. Perry.
Yeah.
Mrs. Hopper and Mrs. Ream, of course. But by that time we changed the name because we'd all grown a bit and we weren't young wives anymore. Besides, there was another young wives group, wasn't
Yeah.
they, formed after that.
And it's only recently that you had to give up your evening meetings in the dark.
Yes,
Isn't it?
yes, we did a couple of years, 3 years ago now, I think. And so now we have coffee mornings
Yeah.
in January
Yeah.
and February.
Yeah.
And we've also given up our spring parties now, I think, and because last year we went out to Elm Farm for a lunch instead, and they seemed to like that. So
I was just thinking that you had to give that up, mainly because of the modern conditions.
Yes,
Afraid to come
that's
out.
right, yes.
And yet you've been going for years.
Yes, thought nothing about it. Well, I
No.
don't know. I mean, I get myself home, but it doesn't bother me. But I think there are some who can't walk, and they've
Yes.
got to have a lift.
Yes.
And there are not so many lifts around now, you see, are they?
No.
It was a pity, really, because we didn't really want to give it up. When it's only a fortnight, once a fortnight,
Yes.
you don't get enough meetings, really. But we do see each other now with these coffee mornings.
I'm wondering how many of your original members remain today?
Quite a
few, I
lot.
should think.
Yeah, I really think most of us are. I was looking through the old register the other night from 1966, and I was quite surprised.
Really?
The Sybil Rawlings, for instance, she'd been with us over 20 years, and I hadn't realised that. Most, a lot have gone, but most of the ones there now are the originals. Not so young now as they were. It's a good fellowship, though.
Because the congregation at St. Peter's has tended to be a moving population, hasn't it,
Oh,
really?
yes,
People have
yes.
come into Norwich, got
Yeah.
promotion and
Yes.
moved on. I can think of all sorts
So can
of
I,
names.
Eric. That is what has happened. I think
Yes.
that is the problem
Yes.
in lots of ways. And apart from that, I think those houses round there in that area, when I can go back to my childhood, they were all children. I mean, there were children in every house almost.
Yes.
But now a lot of those little terrace houses are bought by newly marrieds, and then as they begin to get on, they move out of those
Yes.
and get a house somewhere else and take the children with them. And there are a lot of retired people now. I mean, my road used to be full of children, but there's very, very few children there now.
Yes.
And I think that's why we haven't got them in the Sunday school.
Sunday school, no.
That and the fact that unless the parents are members and want the children to come, they just don't bother. They take them out, you see. If you look at the Sunday school children now, they're nearly all children of parents in the church, aren't they?
Yes.
But as I've said before, years ago there was nothing else to do.
And wasn't there a lot of children like to come, especially before the Sunday school outing time when
Oh,
I was
yes.
young, you know? Getting on
Oh
the
yes,
outing.
they did. Yes, yes. And I can remember the driver on one occasion saying he didn't know how to get there, and he got one boy on his coal cart, and his little brother didn't come to Sunday school, and he said, "I can tell you how to get there, mister." And he got on and went, because he had a Sunday school outing for nothing, because he'd never been to Sunday school. Those sort of tricks I used to get up to.
Jim in this records the Mr. Michael's coming and saying that in comparison with our church they took Holy Communion far less than we do, and that their congregation didn't know the hymns as well as we do. And I was thinking about communion. Presumably at the beginning, did you do as many churches do, have a service and then people stayed if they wished?
That's right, yes. The communion used to be at the end of the service.
That's right, yes. And almost a separate thing.
It was a separate thing,
Yes.
yes. And people just left. And,
Yes.
and I can't remember which minister stopped that, but that wasn't right, of course. I mean, communion service is part of the
It's quite-
service, isn't it? Still, I suppose now it would...
It
well,
would
you
take
see,
so long.
I
wouldn't
know,
it?
but we didn't used to mind how long it took. When we had it after service, and we'd often be there at 1 o'clock
Yes.
and think nothing of it.
Most people stayed then.
I would say most people stayed, yes. There were some who left. Anyone who wasn't a member or perhaps too young, I mean, they would just go, but most people stayed. And it was a long service, but as I say, we didn't mind. After all, it's only an hour a week that we give, isn't it?
True.